Arthur Morgan. Sinn Féin, yes, up, I think, sorry, you're down 1 point, but you're on 9%, which is probably better. It is better maybe by 2 points than you did in the last general election. But Labour really are dominating that left vote now at this stage and encroaching as well into the middle class support.
Yes, they certainly are, and it appears that way from this and other polls. But the point about it is that Labour have now gone into unofficial coalition with the government and with Fine Gael in relation to how the budgetary affairs are handled. They're looking for 2014, which is going to squeeze the life out of the economy and hit people. It's going to affect the people on hospital trolleys. It's going to put more people on hospital trolleys. It's going to put more people, for example, on the dole. They're going to attract the economy. I think Labour's going to be caught very shortly in relation to this.
The reason they are saying they have to accept what's laid out between the government and the EU is because if they don't, and if that is not set as a viable target, well then outsiders will be in to do the job. We won't be able to do it Sinn Féin. It won't be ourselves alone.
They won't be in to do the job. Alan McQuaid said it a few moments ago on your clip that most economists don't believe that 2014 is doable. Most of the parties that I'm talking about
don't believe it either. But you don't look for a longer lead into doing it. If you start out at this point saying 2016, you've got to get some serious ground dug, as it were, before you go looking for maybe a longer timescale.
Sean, what's going on here is more of the same as what has happened over the last 10 years. Bluff and lies. Bluffing the international markets and trying to, and that won't work because they'll be caught out, and lying to the Irish people. I think it would be far better to be honest up front, to be straight with the cards on the table and say, it can't be done in 4 years. We need 6 years, but we will do it in 6 years.
But you see, you were saying that at a time when the government was talking about cutting back 3 billion. The situation is far worse than that. Now,
of course,
if you were to be consistent, you'd say 2020. Because if you said you needed till 2016 to do the 3 billion, well, surely you need longer if it's 7 billion.
No. Well, first of all, it was 7
or 15.
It was 7.5. It was 7.5 billion of a difference when the government made the deal with the EU Commission in the spring. It's now doubled to, we're told, 15 billion or thereabouts, according to the ERSI. So listen, Sean, what we need is certainty about this. I agree, but we also need honesty, truthfulness, and a bit of integrity back to the political system, because that has certainly been missing for long enough now.
Okay, what will you deliver by way of savings on the public pay bill?
Sorry, public sector reform. Let me just say that public sector reform since 2002. Public sector reform is not all about savings. It's about changing the way we do things, and it's about efficiency.
It's about doing more for less.
It's what people want to see that happening, and it is going to happen. And public sector reform will come under Croke Park. I'm quite certain of that. There are clear deliverables in my own area, in education, health, and in social welfare, and they will happen. And I think that will be the reassurance that people need.
Yes, but just before we come back to you, Arthur Morgan, what are you going to save in terms of the public pay bill and in terms of the job numbers?
It's impossible to extrapolate at this remove what those savings are going to the savings will accrue.
Then?
The
point of the country is in a hock.
Sorry, the point of the deal, and everybody accepted at the time that it was a good deal.
You agreed to deal with no targets.
That it was a good. Wait a minute. Public sector pay has been reduced by 15% on average across the board over the last couple of years. Now, there's no other country in Europe that has been able to endure that.
Well, there's no other government in Europe that promised in 2002 to reduce numbers in the public service by 5,000 and actually increase them over the following 3 years by 9,000.
Every single government in Europe is in excessive deficit mechanism at this point. But none of them have been able to affect the changes that we've affected in terms of public pay. What we want to do now is affect changes in the way the public sector is delivered, and we are doing that. And I think there will be deliverables on the table very soon.
I think the critical point here is, Sean, that yes, of course there has to be some cuts in the public sector, and Sinn Féin will be bringing that forward the week after next, and we'll share that with you. But it certainly won't be on those people on the lower echelons who are struggling already. There is significant fat at the upper end of the public sector that needs to be cut, and we will be earmarking that for the government. We're going to come out a bit. Well, right away, Sean, if they were to cap the salaries at €100,000, that's 350 million of a savings before you start. And some
judges, ministers, consultants.
Yes, ministers. We would put ministers in at about 120,000. We would cut TDs back to 80,000, senators back to 65,000. There's a whole swathe. Judges should be cut back as well. They are the people. That's the whole tier of people, Sean, who can afford to pay, not the people at the lower echelons of the public sector, not the people on welfare and pensioners. And that's where the government is going wrong. They're going after crucifying low-income families instead of going after those people who can afford to pay.
Right. Well, in the last few days, the public was treated to the spectacle of the former Anglo-Irish Bank Chief Executive David Drum trying to minimise his own personal financial losses. This in the same week that the Public Accounts Committee was still coming to grips with the enormity of the damage done to the country by the banking crisis. For the public and many politicians, it really does seem that those most responsible are walking away relatively unscathed. Yeah, but I suppose, Arthur Morgan, life is full of examples in which the wheels of justice are seen to grind slowly, so maybe we should just be have a bit more patience.
No, we shouldn't. We're 2 years on, Sean, and people out there are sick of this. There are two aspects of this. One is that not a single banker before the courts 2 years on, and people are really fed up with that when you have 41 at this moment in jail in America. The other aspect of it is, aside from the judicial process, the people who got it so wrong are still in there. One brief example. Ernst & Young were auditors for Anglo-Irish Bank for 9 years. They brought in and signed off on the audited accounts for Anglo in January of 2008. That's the 2008 accounts, showing 784 million profit. 784 million euro profit. Wouldn't you say this is a great bank? A week later, it was nationalised. And a couple of months later, it transpired the loss was 12.7 billion euro. Ernst & Young are now working for the government. They're working for NAMA. They're being paid by the taxpayer. So they're about this town enjoying all sorts of publicity and stunts and events.
They refuse to go before the committees, as I understand it. They don't make themselves available to account for their movements.
And they're still being paid by the taxpayer huge sums of money. So whatever the judicial system, there's no excuse for that whatsoever. And the government are clearly sitting on the fence and allowing these golden circle people to swill around in there.
When NAMA was set up, the one thing we kept on hearing from Brian Lenihan and others was they will be pursued for every last penny. And yet we read in the Sunday Times today that builders who owe the state billions of euro may pay themselves up to €200,000 per annum and keep their trophy homes if they agree certain kind of workout with NAMA. And then separately, the Business Post is a story saying that property developers with NAMA-bound loans are exploiting a loophole that allows them claim tax deductions on interest, but they're not actually paying the interest on which they're claiming the deductions. Now,
but Sean, there's a sniff of accuracy to it when you see that NAMA are employing Ernst & Young, whose record is dubious to say the least in respect of Anglo-Irish Bank, and
well, now maybe they were misled, and maybe Ernst & Young acted in good faith. That would be their claim.
Well, here's the one catch. Why wasn't there a qualification of some kind on the accounts, on the audit accounts? Often you'll see it if there's a distortion, high profit or low profit. You will see a quote like, for example, if exchange rate is involved, there was a fluctuation in exchange rate which gave cause to blah, 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 and therefore some caution is needed in reading the accounts. There was no qualification whatsoever in these accounts. And still they were given a job at huge sums. I don't have the figures with me, but a huge sum from the taxpayers to do what? To value properties for NAMA. So there's more of the same in relation to the 200,000
I think it's important to say that people who audit accounts, and I'm not an accountant and I couldn't...
They're self-regulating, as you know, Barry.
I couldn't tell you this authoritatively, but I understand that they can only really look at about 5% of what goes on in a particular business. So, you know, it's a little bit dangerous to say that because an auditor failed to find out issues that may lead to a prosecution in the criminal law is evidence that they are negligence in some way. I think it's a very dangerous conclusion to come to, and I think also it's not possible for an accountant to audit by way of an X-ray of the company.
It doesn't exactly show them
those kind of problems. So, you know, there's something wrong with auditing per se, rather than with Ernst & Young. And I think that's what we have to do. We have to separate those two issues out.
So we go back into a whole review of the regulation and we look again at that.
Yes.
And we let all these people off the hook
because
again.
As I said at the beginning, it's one of the biggest problems that we've had.
Tomorrow, this
what about